Sunlight After the Storm by David Keaton. A story of heartbreak, healing, and faith through unexpected love. Prologue: When the Wind Changes. Robert stood by the window of his small apartment in Houston, watching the raindrops race down the glass. Every drop reminded him of a moment lost, a word unsaid, or a promise broken. He had given everything to someone he thought would stand by his side. Her name had once been a melody, soft, reassuring. But now it was a wound that stung every time the wind said it out loud. He had dreamed of a life with her. A wedding beneath the Texas sky. Children with her eyes. But love had deceived him. The betrayal came quietly at first, whispers of late nights and secrets, until the truth screamed so loudly, he couldn't unhear it. His heart was shattered, but his spirit, though bruised, still believed. Somewhere, maybe across oceans, the thread of hope still held. So he booked a ticket. To where? The Philippines, a place he'd only known through photos and one distant connection. It wasn't an escape. It was a search for something deeper than healing. It was the beginning of something he couldn't explain. Chapter 1: The Hidden Goodbye. The sun was just beginning to stretch over the skyline when Robert zipped up his last suitcase. His apartment was nearly empty, the walls bare and echoing. He picked up the framed photo of Elena, the woman he once believed would be his wife. In the picture, her smile was wide, but now he wondered if it had ever been honest. A month ago, he found messages on her phone, not just flirtations, but full-blown declarations of love to someone else. And when he confronted her, she didn't deny it. She just left. No apology. No fight. Just a hollow silence that filled every room in his home. Robert held the photo for a long time, then placed it gently in the trash. Not out of anger, but because it no longer belonged to his future. His flight left in 4 hours. As he drove toward the airport, the morning traffic slowed him, but not his thoughts. He remembered when he first met Elena in college. She had laughed at his terrible Tagalog and taught him how to eat lumpia without a fork. She made him feel like the world could be smaller, and his heart bigger. But betrayal rewrites memories. When he finally boarded the plane, his heart was pounding with quiet grief and silent hope. Somewhere in the Philippines, the next chapter of his story was waiting. And he prayed, not for love, but for peace. Chapter 2: Cebu Skies and Stranger Eyes. The descent into Mactan Cebu International Airport was smooth, but Robert's heart felt anything but. The tropical clouds rolled like warm waves across the airplane windows, and below, a green tapestry of palm trees, rooftops, and rice fields greeted him. He hadn't flown internationally in over a decade. Now 55, Robert was a man carrying more than just luggage. He carried the weight of a broken past and the fragile hope that something better waited far from the world he once knew. At the arrivals terminal, the heat kissed his skin and the unfamiliar buzz of tricycles and Cebuano dialect filled the air. It was beautiful and overwhelming. He had made arrangements to stay with a man named Manong Tito, a distant friend of his late uncle, who offered a small room to rent for cheap. Robert recognized him instantly. Tall, wiry, leathery skin from years in the sun, and the most welcoming grin he'd seen in months. "Welcome to Cebu, Kuya Robert," Tito called out, pulling him in for a warm handshake and pat on the back. Come, I have a car. It's not fancy, but it runs." On the drive to Tito's place, they passed bustling street markets, children playing barefoot soccer, and sari-sari stores glowing in the early evening sun. The culture felt alive in a way Robert hadn't experienced in years. Loud, joyful, imperfect, and honest. That night, after dinner of fish tinola and steamed rice, Robert sat on a plastic chair outside the small guest house. Crickets sang. The stars were shockingly bright. And then he heard her voice. Soft. Gentle. Curious. "Excuse me, are you American?" He turned and saw her, Amara. She had almond eyes that seemed to hold questions the stars couldn't answer, and a notebook clutched to her chest. She was younger than him, maybe in her late 30s, but not childish. Her presence was calm, but full of spark. I guess the accent gives it away? Robert smiled. She chuckled. A little. I live nearby. I teach at the school down the road. There was a pause. Comfortable, like a breath you didn't realize you were holding. I'm Robert, he said. Amara, she replied. And just like that, the thread pulled. Chapter 3. A Kindness by the River. A week passed, and Robert found himself adjusting to the rhythm of life in Cebu. Morning rooster calls, freshly cooked pandesal from the bakery around the corner, and the warm, earthy scent of the streets after afternoon rain had begun to feel familiar. Comforting, even. He'd begun walking most mornings, wandering through quiet barangays with his hands behind his back like an old professor. And nearly every day, he passed the school where Amara taught. Each time, she waved with that same quiet smile that made something in Robert's chest feel light. One late afternoon, while exploring a path behind Tito's house, Robert stumbled upon a hidden riverbank, quiet and glistening beneath the golden sun. He sat on a rock, staring at the soft current. The moment was almost holy. Then came the sound of feet on leaves. Didn't expect to see anyone here, Amara said, appearing behind him with a small basket of laundry. I could say the same, Robert smiled. She sat beside him and dipped a few items into the water, scrubbing silently for a moment. This was my mother's favorite place, she said, voice hushed. Before she passed. I come here when I need to think. I'm sorry, Robert offered gently. She looked at him, eyes soft. We all lose something, but sometimes we find something too. They didn't speak again for a while. The sound of water flowing and birds singing filled the spaces words couldn't. Why are you here, Robert? She asked finally. He exhaled, long and slow. I was betrayed by someone I trusted. Gave her everything. And when she left, I lost more than just a relationship. I lost part of myself. Amara didn't react with pity, only understanding. You're trying to heal. I guess, he said, but I'm not rushing it. You don't have to. She stood, gathering her laundry. You're welcome to walk with me anytime, Kuya. And with that, she turned back toward the trees, barefoot and sure. Robert stayed by the river for a long while after she left, watching the water shimmer as if it carried his sorrow downstream. Something in his heart whispered, You're not alone anymore. Chapter 4. Storm in the Distance. The monsoon rolled in like a slow whisper that grew louder by the hour. What started as overcast skies had turned into a full downpour by nightfall. Rain pounded the corrugated rooftops of Tito's home as thunder grumbled across the hills like an old giant stretching in the dark. Robert sat by the window, a cup of warm salabat, ginger tea, in his hand, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. It had been a peaceful couple of weeks, growing into a quiet friendship with Amara. She never asked for more than he could give. But something about her steadiness, her rootedness, reminded him of a life he thought he'd lost the right to dream about. Do storms always come this fast here? Robert asked, turning to Tito. Tito chuckled, holding a flashlight and checking candles. Life in the Philippines, my friend. Rain teaches patience. And sometimes you just have to wait it out. Robert nodded. He wasn't afraid of storms. He had weathered worse, inside his own soul. Later that night, the power flickered and went out completely. With the wind howling through the trees, Robert lit a candle and sat in silence, grateful for something simple, the roof over his head. Just then, a knock. He opened the door and saw Amara, drenched in rain, her face pale. Sorry, she gasped. My house is flooding, and I can't get the back door to stay shut. Without hesitation, Robert threw on his jacket and followed her. The path to her home was muddy and slick, and lightning lit their way between bursts of darkness. Her small house, raised on concrete stilts, had water already pushing up through the back kitchen door. Robert didn't ask. He just got to work. He found spare bricks to press against the door, helped her gather valuables, and moved her most treasured possessions, photos, letters, old school books, to higher shelves. The storm raged for hours, but Robert stayed. When the worst passed and the floodwaters began to retreat, they sat on the floor, damp and exhausted, a single candle flickering between them. "I didn't know who else to call," Amara whispered. Robert looked at her, wet hair clinging to her cheeks, eyes tired but still burning with that same quiet spark. "You called the right person," he said. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man running from pain. He felt like a man who was needed. Chapter 5: Letters and Lanterns. The next morning brought stillness. Birds cautiously resumed their songs as if testing whether the world had survived the night. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth, and the rising sun shimmered over the scattered puddles and debris. Robert and Amara had barely slept. They sat on her bamboo porch sipping reheated coffee, wrapped in silence. When Robert finally stood to leave, Amara reached into a small tin box near her bookshelf. "Wait," she said softly. She handed him a folded piece of paper. "I used to write letters," she explained, not quite meeting his eyes. "Even if I never sent them. This one I wrote last week. I wasn't sure I'd ever give it to you." Robert hesitated, then gently unfolded the letter. Her handwriting was careful, like her. "Kuya Robert, there's something in you I recognize. Not just sadness, but survival. A kind of quiet strength I've only seen in people who've truly lost something, but refuse to let it define them. I don't know your whole story, and I don't need to. But I want you to know I see you. And even if all you want is peace, I hope you find it here. You're not invisible. Amara." His hands trembled slightly as he folded the paper again, his throat thick with emotion. "Thank you," he said simply. That evening, the Barongi held a lantern festival, a tradition to bring light after a storm. Families lined the riverside with candles and floating coconut shells, each one carrying a wish, a prayer, or a name. Robert watched as Amara lowered her lantern into the water, eyes closed. He followed suit, whispering a name he hadn't spoken aloud in weeks. Elena. Not in bitterness, but as a release. As their lanterns drifted side by side, Robert and Amara stood in silence once again. But this silence was different. It was whole. Chapter 6: The Scammer Named Daphne. The peace Robert found in Cebu didn't last uninterrupted. One humid afternoon, he received a message on his phone, a name he didn't recognize, Daphne. The photo attached was of a young woman, clearly Filipina, with perfectly filtered features and a flirty smile. The message read, "Hi handsome. I saw your profile in a travel group. You look like someone I'd love to meet. Philippines Yellow Heart." He chuckled, but also hesitated. He hadn't posted in any travel groups. Still, curiosity is a quiet trickster. Over the next few days, Daphne messaged again. She told him she was from Surigao, that she loved older men who were gentle and full of wisdom. She said she wanted a better life, and maybe he could be part of that. It felt good to be noticed, to be wanted. But something felt off. Amara noticed his distracted energy and asked him over dinner, "Is everything okay?" Robert shrugged, brushing it off. "Just someone online. She seems sweet, maybe too sweet." Amara's face changed, concern creeping into her features. "Be careful, Kuya. Some women here, they don't always speak from the heart. Some speak from desperation. Or worse, manipulation." That night, Robert did some digging. He reverse searched Daphne's profile picture. It was stolen, a model from Manila. Not Daphne. Not real. And then it hit him. He had almost fallen for it again. But this time, he had a warning, and someone who truly cared. The next day, he showed Amara everything. Instead of gloating, she placed a hand over his. "You've been hurt," she said. "Scammers don't just steal money. They steal hope." Robert looked at her, this woman who had no script, no sweet nothings, no games. I'm tired of losing pieces of myself to people who never earned them, he said. Amara nodded slowly. Then stop giving them away. Give them to people who stay. And in that moment, Robert realized he wasn't the same man who got on that plane weeks ago. Chapter 7: When the Heart Knows. The days that followed were quieter, more intentional. Robert spent less time online and more time in the real world, with real people. He helped Manong Tito repaint an old gate, visited the local market to try unfamiliar fruits, and walked Amara home from school when the heat wasn't too cruel. One evening, the two of them sat beneath a large Nara tree on the edge of the Burundi. Fireflies blinked in the growing dusk, and somewhere, a radio played a faint Kundiman love song. They didn't speak for a long time. Finally, Amara said, "You don't talk about your past much anymore." "I've been trying not to live in it," Robert answered. She nodded, then whispered, "Do you still think about her?" He took a breath. "Yes, but not the same way. I used to think losing her broke me. But now, I see it differently. Losing her revealed what I had been holding on to, illusions, hopes built on shaky ground." "And now?" Amara asked. He turned toward her. "Now, I think about today. About this place. About you." Amara smiled faintly, her eyes shining like the moon above them. She didn't say anything, but her hand moved ever so slightly, brushing his. The gesture was simple, but it was everything. Robert didn't need fireworks, declarations, or grand passion. He needed this. The quiet honesty of being seen, and gently touched, without fear. He looked at Amara, truly looked at her, and felt something steady rise inside him. Not lust, not longing, but love, the kind that grows in gardens, not fireworks. He whispered, "Maybe the heart knows when it's safe again." Amara's smile deepened. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it knows who's worth the risk." Chapter 8: The Call That Changed Everything. It was a clear morning, the kind where everything feels possible. Robert had just finished helping Amara carry some teaching supplies to the school when his phone rang. An American number. Houston. He almost didn't answer. But curiosity still lived in him, even if he no longer trusted it. "Hello?" he said cautiously. The voice on the other end froze him in place. "Robert? It's Elena." His breath caught. She didn't sound smug. She didn't sound cruel. Just tired. "I know I don't deserve your time," she began. "But I heard you were in the Philippines. From a mutual friend." Robert said nothing. "I made a lot of mistakes," she continued. "I thought what I wanted was freedom, excitement. I ended up with loneliness. I thought maybe if you ever wanted to talk." "I don't," Robert said, calm and certain. A long pause. "Okay," she whispered. "I just needed to say it. Goodbye, Robert." Click. He stared at the phone for a long moment. No rage. No tears. Just a strange relief, like closing the last chapter of a book he didn't even realize he was still carrying. That evening, he told Amara. "She called?" Amara asked quietly. "She did," Robert replied. "But I didn't feel what I thought I would. No anger. No longing. Just peace." "I'm glad," Amara said, her voice soft. They stood at the edge of her small garden, watching the calachuchi blossoms sway in the evening breeze. Robert reached for her hand. "Amara," he said, "I don't know what's next. But I know what's now. And I want that, with you." She squeezed his hand. "Then let's begin here. Not to replace the past, but to build something better." Chapter 9: The Typhoon and the Test. The warnings came days in advance. Typhoon Lucinda was barreling toward the Visayas region, a Category 4 storm with winds strong enough to peel rooftops like paper. Locals hurried to board windows, stock up on rice and canned goods, and prepare for a power outage that could stretch into days. Robert had never experienced a typhoon before. The air itself felt tense, like nature was holding its breath. He offered to help Amara evacuate to Tito's sturdier concrete home, but she declined. "I've been through storms," she said, tying bamboo slats tighter across her window frames. "What matters is having someone with you who won't leave." So Robert stayed. The wind arrived like a beast just after nightfall, loud, chaotic, unstoppable. Rain slammed the roof in endless fists. The trees bent and wailed. The whole house creaked like it was pleading to stay standing. Then the power went out. In the dim glow of candlelight, Robert and Amara sat shoulder to shoulder on the floor, bracing against the walls as the storm threatened to shake the home apart. Water began to push under the door, soaking their feet. "We need to move," Robert said urgently. Outside, the wind howled like a scream, but they pushed forward together, waist deep in floodwater, trudging to a neighbor's two-story home made of reinforced concrete. Lightning illuminated their path in brief flashes, guiding their steps through the rising surge. Inside the shelter, soaked and breathless, Amara shivered, teeth chattering. Robert pulled her close, arms wrapped around her, trying to warm her with nothing but his presence. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm not leaving." She clung to him silently. Not in fear, but in trust. When morning finally came, the storm had passed, but the world it left behind was bruised. Streets were flooded, trees toppled, and pieces of rooftops lay scattered like fallen leaves. Amara's home was damaged, but still standing. They returned together and began cleaning, side by side, sweeping out mud and salvaging what could be saved. Later that evening, as they rested on the porch beneath a gray but calming sky, Amara turned to him and asked softly, "Why did you stay?" Robert looked into her eyes, worn from fear but still full of fire. "Because you matter to me. And storms don't scare me anymore." Her expression shifted, not into a smile, but something deeper. Something sure. "Then we'll face whatever comes next," she said. "Together." Chapter 10: Paperwork and Promises. With the storm behind them, something in Robert had shifted. The adrenaline of survival had faded, replaced by something deeper, a clarity he hadn't known he was looking for. He wasn't just falling for Amara. He was choosing her. Not as a distraction from pain or a second chance at youth, but as a woman who had walked beside him in silence, in floods and in fire. One morning, he sat at a table with a mug of local coffee and began searching immigration requirements. The process was overwhelming: forms, affidavits, financial proofs, health records, timelines. He hadn't dealt with paperwork this intense since his divorce. And somehow, this felt even more important. Later that day, he asked Amara to meet him at the local municipal office. "I want to start something official," he told her. "I'm not rushing anything, but I want to stay longer. Not as a tourist. As a man who wants to build something here, with you." Amara looked stunned, caught between hope and fear. "Robert, I've seen men come here, fall in love, then leave when it gets complicated. I'm not leaving," he said. "You say that now." He gently took her hand. "Then help me prove it." So they began. Together. They visited notaries, gathered birth certificates, got copies of Robert's divorce decree, opened a local bank account. It wasn't romantic. It was tedious, expensive, confusing, and at times, defeating. But through it all, Amara stood by him, even when the internet cafe was stifling and the government lines stretched into hours. They would sit on cracked plastic chairs, share ice-cold bottled water, and laugh at how foreign everything felt, until it didn't anymore. One evening, walking home beneath a sky thick with stars, Amara whispered, "You could have chosen anyone. Anywhere." Robert stopped walking. "I didn't choose you because you were easy," he said. "I chose you because you're real. And that's all I want now." Amara looked at him, eyes shining with more than tears. With truth. Chapter 11: A Room of Their Own. After weeks of documents, appointments, and long lines in municipal offices, Robert was granted an extended stay visa. It wasn't permanent yet. but it meant he could remain in the Philippines legally, without rushing decisions or overstaying his welcome. He celebrated quietly by buying a second-hand bookshelf and filling it with Tagalog phrasebooks, journals, and letters he hadn't sent, most of them addressed to no one in particular. Just thoughts, prayers, hopes. Though he'd grown close to Amara, he still returned to his small rented room each night, while she returned to hers. There was a rhythm to it, a respectful boundary that honored something sacred in their bond. They spent their days together, visited nearby islands, sat by the river, cooked sinigang on rainy nights in separate kitchens. And each time they parted ways for the evening, Robert would gently say, "I'll see you tomorrow if it's meant to be." And every time, she would smile. "It always is." One afternoon, Amara surprised him with a canvas bag. "I thought you could use this," she said. Inside was a notebook with a hand-drawn cover and a tiny embroidered quote that read, "New roots take time." Robert opened the first page. She had written, "When we love slowly, deeply, and truthfully, it lasts longer than fire. This is not a race. It's a garden." He looked at her, touched. "You're the most patient woman I've ever known," he said. She laughed. "That's how I know you're worth it." Chapter 12. The Question Without a Ring. Weeks turned into months, and what had started as healing began to bloom into something unmistakable. Robert and Amara had weathered monsoons and paperwork, cultural gaps and quiet doubts. Their love wasn't loud. It was steady, like an old song that never stopped being beautiful, even when the world got too noisy. One afternoon, they visited a quiet mountain town on the island of Bohol. The air was cool, the roads dusty and winding. They'd stopped to admire a small hilltop view overlooking endless rows of rice terraces. Robert leaned against a wooden post, watching Amara as she tied her hair into a bun, her cheeks flushed from the hike. He didn't have a ring. He didn't have a speech. He just had a heart that had made its decision. "Amara," he said softly, almost afraid of breaking the peace. She turned, sensing the weight in his voice. "I know I'm older. I know I've made mistakes. And I know we've both taken this slowly. But I also know that I don't want another day to pass without you knowing. I want to build the rest of my life with you. If you'll have me." Amara blinked, her lips parting slightly. She stepped closer, eyes filled with something between surprise and clarity. "I don't need a ring to know what's real," she whispered. Then she took his hand, the same hand that once trembled with regret, now warm and still. "Yes, Robert," she said, eyes shimmering. "Yes, I will." They stood there on the hillside, no crowd, no music, no fanfare, only wind through trees and the sound of two hearts finding a home. Chapter 13. The Wedding Beneath the Palms. The morning sun cast long golden rays over the sleepy barangay as a gentle breeze carried the scent of sampaguita and mango blossoms through the air. It wasn't a grand venue. There were no violins or limousines. But beneath a grove of swaying palm trees, a clearing had been lovingly prepared with white folding chairs, local flowers, and simple woven decorations made by Amara's students. Robert stood in a clean barong Tagalog, his silver hair combed neatly, his eyes steady. Amara approached slowly in a flowing cream dress, simple, elegant, barefoot, her smile wide and trembling all at once. The small group of neighbors, friends, and children clapped and cheered. They were married by a kind, elderly local official under a bamboo arch decorated with hibiscus and palm leaves. The ceremony was short, spoken in English and Cebuano, with no elaborate rituals. Just promises. "I vow to walk beside you when the days are easy and when the road feels uphill," Robert said. "I vow to honor the journey that brought us both here," Amara said, voice steady. "I vow to choose you every day," they said together. After the ceremony, there was lechon, pancit, and laughter echoing through the trees. A young girl sang a folk song with her ukulele, and someone pulled Robert into a gentle tinkling dance. He was terrible at it, but he danced anyway, because joy didn't care how it looked. Later that night, As the guests dispersed and the fireflies lit the path to their new home, a modest house they had built together on land gifted by Tito, Robert and Amara stood hand in hand beneath the stars. "This is more than I dreamed," Robert whispered. Amara leaned into him. "That's because we didn't dream it alone. We built it, thread by thread." Chapter 14: Threads of Hope. Months passed. The seasons turned with quiet rhythm, rain giving way to sun, and sun giving way to golden evenings filled with music, roasted corn, and laughter from nearby homes. Robert adjusted to the life he had once only dreamed of. Their home, modest and surrounded by banana trees and bougainvillea, became a haven. Amara planted herbs in the back garden. Robert set up a small desk by the window where he journaled every morning, his words no longer heavy with sorrow, but stitched with gratitude. He had stopped asking why things had happened the way they did, why Elena left, why he had to lose everything to find something real. Because now, every sunrise reminded him that hope doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it walks in slowly, barefoot, with a shy smile and gentle strength. One morning, Robert sat on their porch sipping coffee, watching Amara hang laundry under the warm sun. He thought of his old life, the apartment, the silence, the ache. And then he looked at the present, a woman who knew the worth of waiting, a community that had embraced him, and a life that had been handwoven from nothing but grace and second chances. Amara joined him, setting down a cup of tea beside him. They didn't need to say much. Sometimes the quiet said more than words. He reached for her hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" she asked, smiling. "For loving me slowly." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "That's the only way love truly lasts." Together, they sat beneath the Philippine sun, wrapped not in riches, but in something stronger. Hope. Not the kind that wishes. The kind that waits, weathers, and believes. Epilogue: the moral. Sometimes, the pain that breaks us is the same pain that opens a door. Sometimes, the person we are meant to find is waiting in a land we've never been, with a heart that's never left God. True love doesn't rush. It doesn't manipulate. It builds, one patient step, one gentle word, one honest moment at a time. And when it comes, you'll know. Because it will stay. Copyright 2025 David Keaton. All rights reserved.